Without a shadow of a doubt, it's the crookedest show in social media history. I want to welcome you to another episode of the War Zone. I got my good friend Judge George Risner in the building, Ron Campana, Pastor Richard Vega, and I am the 5-star general. Y'all been waiting for it. I'm going to bring it to you. Tonight on one program, you got 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. We ain't going to battle. We're going to see if we can come up with some solutions. Because that's the way it's supposed to be. Y'all sit back. It's going to be a good one. Say, man, I want to welcome you to another episode of the War Zone and tell you thank you for taking time out to hang out with me every night. You know, without you guys, I wouldn't have a show. So I'm definitely honored to have you on the show with me every single night as we do what we do. Tonight's going to be a very interesting show because tonight we have 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans on the show, but that doesn't matter. What you have is 4 men who are all vying for public office, who would not have a problem working together with each other to try to solve whatever issues we have to make our city and our county a better place. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to start at the top with Judge Risner and let everybody introduce themselves. Tell them what you're running for. Judge Risner.
I'm George Risner. I'm currently a Harris County Justice of the Peace, have been for 35 years as a Democrat. I've elected to run for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 2 because of the great need in the areas that we're going to speak of tonight, and that's mainly crime. The fact that the present commissioner has not funded and not voted to fund the district attorney's office of more than 100 DAs that are missing, which is a very important part of the criminal justice system, as well as the sheriff came over and asked for over 1,000 people or officers in the last 2 weeks and got no to an answer for that. We need people in the prosecution of the courts, as well as we need the sheriff's office. And then, of course, the biggest thing about my opponent is he's interested and spent $3.5 million, all the way up to $5 million, to get rid of 4 of the 8 constables in Harris County. As a justice of the peace, I work with the constable. I know how important the constable's department is, as well as the justice of the peace. If you get rid of 4 constables, that's probably going to knock out 8 justice of the peace courts. That is not what Harris County or the direction we need to be going into at this time, with the crime at an all-time high rate, never in the history of Texas or Harris County. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Mr. Ron Campana, introduce yourself and tell them what you're running for, my friend.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Ron Campana. I'm running for Justice of the Peace, Precinct 1, Place 2. I'm in the Democratic primary. I've been an attorney here in this city for 37 years, but most importantly, I'm offering my experience for this position. I think we all know the pandemic has hurt all of us. It has really complicated issues throughout our community. Particularly these courts have been affected by that pandemic. There was a moratorium on evictions, as well as an interruption in jury service. I believe we need some experienced people to move forward with these matters and get the community together. That's why I'm running for Justice of the Peace as a Democrat. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, Ron. And last but not least, the man of God himself, Pastor Richard Vega.
Hey, thank you so much, 5-star general. And I want to thank everybody for coming on here tonight and being on here. But yes, my name is Richard Vega. I am running for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 2. As we all know, there's been a lot of major issues that have gone on in Harris County. Our crime rate is up. Our murder rate just in the last 2 years is up almost 80%, just in homicides alone. So we all know and we feel the effects of that. Capital murder rate is all-time highs. Our bail system is broken. Everywhere we look, there's multiple issues. And I feel like I'm the man for the job. I've been continuously working in our communities, for our community and over the last decade, really serving our community throughout Precinct 2. In the last 6 years, I've really stepped up my game. In 2020, I was able to feed over 100,000 individuals in 5.5 months through Farmers to Families with President Trump and his when he signed that enact. But I tell you, you know, that wasn't just it. I mean, Hurricane Harvey's, back to school bashes, veterans, everything that I do involved in the community and making sure that we're a better community and we work together. So I'm looking forward and showing off my skills and my teamwork, my team ability at a higher level for our communities and turn our county around at the highest level possible. And to be able to show the world that we're no longer the human trafficking county of the world. No longer are we the infested, violent crime infested county among the world either. So I'm looking for all of you guys to go out and vote for me. I know Judge George Risner is, and I thank him and all of my other people that are out there voting.
Okay. Well, I tell y'all what, we're gonna get it going. We have an interactive show because most nights, almost every single night, we'll have somebody that's watching pop a question in, and if they pop a good question in, then I'll put it up, and then we need to address it. So we need to start with the elephant in the room. We have to start with crime. As we know, I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, white or black, doesn't matter to me, that our police officers should not be a target. They should not be a target. It's just, the back to blue or whatever you want to call it. I really don't care. But police officers go out of their way every single day to keep each and every one of us safe. So the question is going around the table, how do we do a better job addressing crime, especially with this failed bail reform? What do we need to do? Judge Risner.
It's the whole system. We haven't had a public defender department except for 12 years here in Harris County. It's a very important. And the present commissioner's court has spent a lot of money on it, and it needed to be improved. But at the same time, another important ingredient is the prosecution in the DA's office when they're 100 plus prosecutors short. And then you've got the sheriff. I mean, this is a multi-facet problem. Then you get to the sheriff and the problem with not having enough officers, just throwing money over there and bragging about paying overtime, $50 million. That's not the right solution. You need more boots on the ground. You need more improvement in the sheriff and the jail. One thing that very few people talk about is the mental health portion of the jail. It's real important. But a great deal of the people that are locked up would be better served if they were in the Harris County Mental Hospital. The present commissioner has not done anything to make sure that new mental health hospital is finished. He's been in office 3 years. The other commissioner before him got the funding, got it started. It's still not finished. That should be a priority. That would be a big help to the sheriff's department and the people that are locked up. Everybody in there is not somebody that's went out and robbed somebody or killed somebody. There's some people in there with some other serious problems that need to be directed to get help through medical, a doctor's help. The last but not least is the last thing with the crime rate the way it is we need to be taking any boots off the ground, especially in the constable's office. In some of the unincorporated areas, that's the only law enforcement they have is doing minor crimes. Of course, we do have the sheriff's department that comes in, for more serious crimes, but the constable is a very important ingredient, just as well as the jail and the sheriff, is just as well as the public defender office or the prosecution through the DA's office. This all makes up the program, as well as the judges or the special judges or the fee officers that they have coming in and setting these bonds. That's all of it works together. All of it needs to be improved, not just throw a little money to overtime and using the same number of employees in the jail. That's not getting anything done. That's causing more problems.
All right, Pastor Vega, what we're going to do, we're going to kind of piggyback on it. The overtime to me is a waste of time. And the reason that I say that is because if we're not going to be proactive to deal with the crimes before they happen, then it really doesn't matter. What's your opinion on that, Pastor Vega?
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Just hiring overtime officers is still bringing down the morale. These officers have families they want to get home to each and every night. They leave their homes and they don't know if they're returning. you told us just now. I'm just now finding out that an officer lost his life today. He's not returning home. And this is something they deal with each and every day. And I don't think overtime is the solution. The solution is going to be to hire more officers, to get more patrols on the street, and officers that know our communities. We can't just hire officers to come in and outside of our communities and expect them to know our community. They really got to know us as a cultural and as a county within the certain cities and where they're at and where they're patrolling. Police presence is always good, regardless of who the crime activity is. And I'm going to give you an example. Right here by my church, a couple blocks away, we have an apartment community that was on the #1 hot list for the most crime and gang infested apartment communities. There was a 2-hour gang shootout in there. There was 5 wounded and 1 dead. Now that's a war zone. Okay. Now you look at that and that's crazy. But what we found out was that there was really no police presence in there. The police were understaffed out of Houston, and that was patrolling in that area. But I was able to reach out through Councilman Knox, and I sat down with the chief out there and said, okay, we got to come up with a solution because these citizens are going to start reacting, right? And it's going to be a different response that we really don't want. And so what they were able to do was to get more officers, pull them from different substations, and allow them to patrol in those areas. And what did we find out? That police presence brought down crime in that area. They were able to bring out these towers. I don't know what they're called, but they're towers with a bunch of cameras on them. And so just those being put up in the community brought crime down. Police presence in our communities, they show the presence, and the presence alone will deter the criminal, right? When I was in the military, when we used to get called out to certain situations, and I'll just give you an idea. Right now, we know that the military has been dispatched to the borders, right? Now, are they there to combat anything? No. It's just to have a military presence, that our military is on the front lines of our borders. It sends a message to everyone else that they're there, they're available, and that they're present. Now, are they able to engage? No. Now, if something goes crazy, yeah, they'll be able to engage. Our police officers are the same way. When we get more police officers into the streets, it starts sending a message, and it's going to draw crime rate down. So we have to get back to hiring more officers. And just like Judge Risner said, we have to get back to fixing the whole system within itself, because the officers can go out and arrest somebody, and but then they're going to be released in 24 hours. That's why we have over 156 criminals that have been released to murder somebody on the streets. That's the truth. We have to fix the whole system as a whole. And in fact, our current county commissioner was the reason why the bail reform passed anyways. He could have been the vote that never even voted on it. He could have shot it down, but he chose not to.
Now, Mr. Campana, I travel all across the U.S., and there is a narrative that people constantly they preach. They say, well, when the Democrats are in control of the city and the county, it's total chaos. From a crime perspective, the Democrats have had control of Harris County for a little while now. Are the Democrats the ones who can fix the crime, or should they just turn it over to us Republicans? That's your question.
Well, I don't agree with the suggestion that the Democrats' control have a direct effect on crime. Maybe I'll accept your suggestion that the criminal justice system is having problems. But to say that Democrats are somehow aligned with crime or for crime or support crime is something that's absolutely ludicrous, and I can't accept that narrative. I believe what Judge Risner has said is important, that there are responsible Democrats who have responsible answers. And I support many of the things that Judge Risner had just suggested. The support of the constable's office, that's directly linked to the justices of the peace. We cannot perform our functions, our duties, without a viable constable's office. And to say that all Democrats are somehow in lockstep with defunding the police or soft on crime is not true. And the evidence of that is our appearance on your show today.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna chime in on it. I do get to travel a lot, and I've been to some spots where I've seen different fractions control the government in the city. And honestly, where there's Republican controlled city government and county government, there's little to less chaos. But where there's Democratic control of the government, is this bail reform thing, they're trying it all over the country, and it's not working. We just have to get to the point where if we're going to make it work, we got to come up with a better way of doing it. But the way that we're doing it right now, it's not working. Like Pastor Vega said, 156 people. 156 people dead because somebody had multiple bonds. Now, I want Judge Risner to speak on this. And of course, you, Mr. Campana, because you're going to be a justice of a peace. Oh, how many bonds you supposed to get? I know the Constitution say they're entitled to a bond, but at the same time, if they're a violent criminal and you gave them a bond and they violate the terms of it, they cut their monitor off their leg and do the things that they do. How high should that next bond be?
Let me just justify first that justice of the peace don't hear the crimes that you're speaking of.
Exactly.
We hear Class C. We haven't locked people up in Harris County for a Class C was punishable by fine only for probably 10 years. But talking about the crimes that you're speaking of, taking somebody's life or in overpowering somebody to the degree that you've harmed them, no, they shouldn't be released. It should be more of a risk base. That judge 35 years ago, when I first took office, the JPs went downtown. We listened to the jail docket on Class Cs. The higher up judges all were there themselves, all elected, and heard those cases. Referring those cases to someone else to set the bond, it's not what the people in the state of Texas is set up to do. The elected official should be the one that does that. And they should judge each person and at their risk and what they're being charged with. I can't understand how somebody could be put out on a bond for taking somebody else's life or inflicting pain on someone, and then they come back before me within a month or 3 months or 6 months. If you pay any attention to your docket, pay any attention to the records that you have before you, and you talk to this person. I mean, I deal with the mental health hospital for 35 years, and it's probably more time consuming and more in depth than having somebody come before you and tell you that with the right questions, what crime they committed or have they been locked up before. I don't understand how they are just repeatedly let loose and let loose and let loose.
Pastor Vega?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Democratic control, Republican control, it's not working. Bond reform. I understood, misdemeanor bond reform. I don't have a problem with somebody that has a weed charge. He shouldn't sit in jail 6 or 7 months. No, but they took it and they started applying it to these felony bonds, these violent felony bonds. And now you got these people getting out on 5 and I knew a kid, honestly, 16 years old, that had 12 bonds. 12. Wow. And it makes no sense. So is there a way that we can fix this? I mean, should we abandon bond reform or should we figure out a different way to do it? Because right now it's just not working.
Yeah, right now, my suggestion would be to eliminate the bail reform system that's going on right now. Currently, let's go back to the old system, and then let's start taking pieces and puzzles and start putting things in and implement it to where we can function as a county. Because what's going on right now is uncalled for. It's ridiculous, and the reality of it is we are Democratic ran right now. And, if you look at the commissioner's court right now, that's Democratic ran Houston, and you look on, and I never thought I would have seen it here in Texas, but our commissioner's court had pulled out the playbook for the Democratic national agenda across the country, and just took out the playbook after playbook and after playbook. And it's sad because I never thought that I would see that here at home in Texas, much less here in our beautiful county and our cities that we have. But they've taken it out. They've gone through the system that I'm too poor, so I can get bail. Are you kidding me? If I go out and do an aggravated robbery, all I have to do is say that I'm too poor. There's no background check on that. We don't do any investigation whether or not that individual has income or not. And if what they're saying is valid, and yet we let them out on a PR bond, on an aggravated robbery, on aggravated assault, on attempted murders. I mean, these people are getting out. That one individual, that kid got out on, he had over 67 priors, and he got out and shot his girlfriend 22 times. Now, did he have to reload? Think about that, gentlemen. 22 times on 67 priors. But there was a judge that thought it was okay to let this individual out. That's been the norm in Harris County. And I think we're all feeling it, regardless of what party you belong to, as we as citizens would like to go to Walmart, would like to go to the mall, or wherever we would like to go, 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, if we need to run to the store. We want to run to Kroger's, HEB at 9:30 at night and not feel unsafe. The reality of it is that our citizens don't feel safe, that they can't even go to the stores in the evening times if they need something. If they need something for their child the previous night because a mom worked a double shift and she can't get the proper project tools for her child to be able to work a project that night because she's too scared to go to the store because of the community she lives in. Because our judges and our commissioner's court have failed us. The bail reform system in Harris County is completely broken, period.
Mr. Campana, let me piggyback on that one. A lot of people that are in the chat are saying that the judges themselves who do this, let these people out on multiple bonds, they should be held accountable. What's your opinion?
Well, first, let's start off with the suggestions that Pastor Vega had made, which were correct. How did that person be allowed to, after 60 some odd charges, be allowed to have a handgun and have an opportunity to commit another crime? You can well imagine that those 60 some odd events that he referred to occurred over a very long period of time, not only during the period, and this is a short period, when the Democrats were in control of Commissioner's Court and maybe these particular judges were in office. This issue of bail has been addressed by the Republican-controlled legislature this past session. They now have presented a framework for all judges to follow. Now, who should be held accountable? Obviously, the person who commits the crime should be held accountable. To criticize public officials that may have had a failure in judgment, they should be held accountable for that judgment. But let's not equate the crime with the judgment here. There are responsible Democrats, myself, and candidate George Risner for commissioner, who will speak out against the problems and the errors of judgment that have been committed by these newly elected officials. But remember, these officials were not elected by Democrats. They were elected by the citizens of this county. And now's the time to review their record. It's election season. So let's have a fair and objective review. And that's why Judge Risner and myself have offered ourselves as candidates as alternatives. So let's consider these facts when making a judgment. General,
You're
you're
on
on
mute.
mute.
I'm always at the end of the conversation, so I'm gonna chime in. I think if you're gonna be a judge, you gotta have a backbone. I think you have to have a backbone. You know, back in the day, Judge Risner, kids dreaded going into Judge Ted Poe's courtroom. They didn't want to deal with Judge Ted Poe at all because you knew if you showed up, and if you showed up multiple times, he was going to drop the hammer on you. So here's my question, and then we'll flip over to education. Are these judges too soft when it comes to doing what they need to do? Judge Risner?
I'm not going to refer to it as soft. I think their evaluation of what the bond ruling is not the way I see it. Their interpretation is different. That's why I said earlier about the risk the person before you is to the public. If you question them and you ask them in that hearing, and I compared it to a mental health hearing, you're going to find out what's going on in this person's mind if you spend the time that's necessary. Now, I don't know how much time they're spending, but I think if they would have a better interpretation of what the law says on bond and go to the extent to find out what this person's background, I don't think they would make these calls. I know I wouldn't from what we get to hear about it. I realize we're hearing after the fact. I'll give them credit for that. But I promise you, anyone that comes before the court, even a Class C, I'm going to question them to get a good understanding before I let them go, before I find them go forward in a trial, or before I find them guilty. I think it's in the interpretation of these judges. Why they're doing it, I don't understand. I would like to think that it's not a Democratic Republican subject. I mean, my opponent, Mr. Vega's opponent, got 23 years as a police officer. He should know. He's got a county sheriff for 7 years. Now, why would he went before commissioner's court as a sheriff many times asking for more money for his department. Why hasn't he given it to this sheriff? Even when he comes and asks, he still says no. When they want to hire 50 more constables, which is almost a joke in itself, we needed 250, and he still voted no. I mean, you can't say no to crime. I don't want to believe in my heart that it's a Republican and Democratic issue. I think it's an issue that is touching all of us, our families, our livelihoods, and our safety. And we've got to do something different. We have to be tougher on crime. We have to support the police, as you said earlier.
Pastor Vega, are the judges too soft?
Absolutely, they're too soft. You know, back when I grew up, like you said, and Ted Poe, you know, the streets knew you did not want to go see Judge Ted Poe, and rightfully so. You know, regardless of how you felt about him, but from my understanding,
The man
these
sent
judges have
the man sent his own son to jail.
Come on, I mean, you know. We know how the judicial system was growing up, you know, and I'll tell you though, from my understanding, these judges, when they go and see these defendants, they have everything that they need to know about these individuals, including on the paper are they a risk to the public safety? Now, the judge has to check off on this if that individual is a risk to public safety or not. So they out of everything that they reviewed are making a conscious decision in their greatest judgment, right? We trust these people, these elected officials, to govern over us, to be able to say, hey, they're going to make the right decision because we're not there. We're not reviewing. We find out after the fact, right? And we read about it in the papers and all of these things. And these judges are making a conscious decision to go ahead and let out these criminals based on prior history, whether they've been a violent offender or whatever it may have been. If it walk like a duck, talk like a duck, it's a duck, right? It's pretty simple. and yet they're continuing to let these people out. One of the things that I'll ask both of these judges is, have you sought out to be able to file grievances on your peers? Because I have. I've done a press conference on filing grievances. I've already started the process to file grievances on all these judges. Any citizen within our county can file grievances on these judges and allow their peers to deal with them. Now, if it's not a party issue, are you guys willing to file grievances on these judges if you feel that they're wrong? Because I feel greatly that they're wrong.
Mr. Campana, are they soft? Are the judges soft?
Well, let me talk about an issue that I think is so dear and close to every Republican's heart. It's called the United States Constitution. If you would read the Bill of Rights, it guarantees reasonable bonds to all citizens. So I am a believer in the Constitution. I do not understand how suddenly many Republicans want to just ignore the obvious import and writings contained in the Constitution. You have to start there. And I think most judges start there. Then the laws of the state of Texas, which has just recently been amended, that gives us more criterion on how to set bonds, that has come into effect. So really, the suggestion to file grievances, look, I'll tell you a little secret that most people don't know about judges and lawyers. Judges make mistakes, but guess what? They have an institution called the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, which reviews judges' decisions when they have made error. Now, there's a difference when a judge makes an error versus an action which is so abhorrent to the law or so absolutely despicable that it would call for a grievance. There's a difference. And judges make calls every day, just like an umpire in a baseball game. Sometimes you might not agree with that call, but guess what? You do have an avenue to have it reviewed. And just to say, well, this judge should have a grievance filed against them is out of bounds, because it's going outside of the legal system that our forefathers wrote in a constitution which provides for bail. And just to say, well, you made an error on bail, so you shouldn't be a judge, I don't agree with that. I do think judges' decisions should be reviewed, and people who have problems with it should have the avenue to have them reviewed. But just to say, hey, let's go have a grievance filed, I think shows a really a lack of appreciation of the legal system we have, that we all want to work for all of us.
Well, I'm the last man on the totem pole. I look at a lot of different things when I look at these judges. And one thing I look at is their campaign finance reports. And when I look at their campaign finance reports and I see a prominent African-American county commissioner giving money to them, the guy that's really pushing the bond reform, then I can understand why some of them won't feel that. I honestly feel that they're too soft. It makes no sense. And I believe in the Constitution, and they should have a reasonable bond. But at the same time, if they kill a 9-year-old kid, their bond is $50,000. But if they kill a police officer, their bond's $200,000. Everybody's life matters in this county. So it should be just as much for that 9-year-old as it was for that police officer that lost his life. And that's just the way that I feel. So now we're gonna slide over to education, but we're gonna kind of stay with crime. I've done my research. I'm an education advocate. Some say I'm the best in the state of Texas. And I feel that whenever the educational component is messed up, the crime rate is going to go up. Every single time. You do the research on Chicago. One morning they woke up, they closed 48 black schools. The crime rate went haywire. Because I was just talking to somebody yesterday, and they said, man, you know what? what you said a couple of years ago made sense. That some of the real killers in Harris County actually walk the school hallways from 8 to 4 p.m. I say, I keep telling y'all, some of the most treacherous killers in this county are students in our local school system. What does the school system, or let me rephrase that. How can you, in the position that you in, when you guys win, work with the local school systems, and that includes charter schools as well as public schools, to help deter these children from committing these heinous crimes? Judge Risner?
After school, I realize there's already some of these in place, but after school, before school programs, the counselors in the school, well, you got the elementary schools. That's not when they're walking in there. You've got to pay a lot of attention to these children in elementary and give them the foundation to want to go on. In junior high, you first see that because mom and dad's gone to work, they skip school, come home. Justice of the Peace sees a lot of that. Some of them, for unbelievable reasons, don't have the proper clothing to wear. They're embarrassed. There's so many avenues that you learn as a justice of the peace by 35 years that some of these kids don't. Had one case one time that the young man wouldn't go to school because his father happened to be blind and even though he couldn't see the TV, he kept the TV on. The young man didn't have any place to sleep except for on the couch. He was just too tired because he had been up all night.
Pastor Vega, you fill in for him. We'll get back
so
to
there's so many different programs. Everybody's not cut out to go to college. They've taken away being a plumber, an AC air conditioning person, auto mechanic, paint and body. And the regular school day may not fit in. Some of these kids have to go to work. They're going to have to go to school basically at night, and they may not be able to do English and math, but they can do one of these programs to be a plumber, to be able to take care of themselves and their families. There's so much that can be done in education. I don't know where to tell you to start, but everybody, to quote Marvin Zindler, it's hell to be poor. And the biggest, almost every person that you're talking about, they're not been in the same school system the whole time, meaning they start elementary and they go through the 6th or 7th grade, start junior high and stay in the same place. They move around. They lose so much every time they move because they're the odd one out. They're not Johnny or Sally that's been here, that we know their mom and dad. They come in their PTA. So much goes into these young people that where they develop in a lot of mental health help needs to be along with those counselors to dig in and find out, especially at the junior high level. Not to say elementary is not important, it is, but it shows up more in the junior high and the high school. But it has to be more tailored to each child. Not one size doesn't fit all. Everybody's not, can go to a private school. Everyone can't be in the same school district for 12 years. They move around. These are things out of their control that affects their life, not only while they're in elementary, middle school, and high school, but the rest of their life. We have to step in and do more. Counselors, people that recognize the problem, bring it to the school attention. Every school teacher has a psychiatrist. How many do you know? And I see hundreds and hundreds of kids every year have really got to see a psychiatrist paid for or brought up by the school district. You want to know in 35 years? Probably 6. And that was because the court asked for it, not because there's a school district asking for it. You've got to know enough about this child, dig into what's the problem, kind of like that judge with that person before him that they're going to let out on a bond. You've got to ask questions. You've got to put yourself in, find out what makes them tick, find out what it's going to take to make them go right. Letting them out on bonds is not going to work most of the time, and not seeing that they get the social services that they need in elementary, middle school, and high school is not going to work either, even if it means going to a trade school within the school district and getting credit for it.
Pastor Vega, same question.
Yeah, the last since, obviously since the pandemic, we have really taken a hit in the education system. My wife is an educator. I have an elementary, junior high, and high schooler in my home, and I'll tell you, we've gone through our battles. Obviously, learning how to adjust in the middle of a pandemic. But my wife specializes in dyslexia. She was a principal, so she has the proper training, as you could say. And so we have those things in our home where other kids might not have those things in our home. And a lot of different challenges have occurred over the last couple of years. I feel personally that we're losing generations right now. And when we lose generations, they go to crime. Why? Because they don't understand the classroom. What does it matter? They feel that they're the dumb ones. They can't read. They can't comprehend. They can't do the math. So what I personally feel is that we need to be able to work with local schools within the cities and the county, and be able to develop a system. And one of the systems that I'm looking at is are we able to hire retired teachers for an after school program for a whole year and test kids in math, reading, and comprehension, and reteach the curriculum to the prior year so it lays down more of a foundational work. Now, I said retired teacher. That means non-subs, no people with an associate's degree. We need to have requirements where teachers come in that they know techniques, that they see the problem immediately, and that they can help reteach the foundations that have been lost in the previous year to help regain these students that are really lagging. Because if they went into 2020 and they were already struggling, maybe they had dyslexia, maybe they had ADHD, whatever their learning disability may have been, and then they weren't able to get a laptop for almost a whole entire year of 2020. So they lost that whole year. And as we know, children's brain constantly develop throughout the years. And so we have to be able to capture that some way, somehow. And it's up to us, those that are seeking leadership or in leadership, to come up with something. And it may or may not work. But what we need to do is attempt to do something to help the education in our school systems to regain what has lost. Because these kids, when they don't understand, they're going to go to the streets. And the only thing that they know is the streets. They understand the game. They understand how the streets work. And then they're going to end up in front of you guys or the criminal court system and standing and end up doing time because they never understood and they didn't read, or they didn't know how to do math. But also bringing back the technology part or the technical schools. These kids know how to work a tablet by 2 years old, right? Cell phones. These kids are amazing. You give a cell phone to a 2-year-old kid, they know how to move it, go to apps, and do all kinds of crazy things. So being able to bring certain like Judge Risner was saying, talking about welding and plumbers and electrical, bringing those skill sets back to the high schoolers. So if they do want to depart from school, they got some type of skill set where they can be an asset in the community versus a liability. So they can go out and earn money, which is a great living. If they're in that field, they can own a business. They can be able to do what they need to do and provide for their families and feel comfortable and strong about who they are as individuals versus feeling like they don't know anything and all they're ever going to do is know the streets. And we really have to combat this. It's a very important issue on the campaign trail.
Mr. Campana, same question.
Yes, and I think you brought forward a very important point. The point is crime and the issues we're facing are symptoms of another problem in our community. And I think where your advocacy in schools and developing children to be better citizens and better equipped to lead productive lives, it is a great issue and a great cause, because within those schools, everyone's future resides. Those children will control our future. So we must do everything in our power to invest in those people, to develop those people, and to be responsive to those people. And I know the general, that's an issue that's near and dear to your heart, and I fully agree that is something we must all commit to, because that ultimately is the solution to the crime problem we've been discussing. And when that is fully addressed, fully funded, and we give our all, we then can say we have made a productive choice and direction to everybody in this community.
Hey, I appreciate the insight. For me, I deal with schools every day. I'm all over the country dealing with schools. And I went to Hinesville, Georgia about a month ago. And the superintendent took me on a ride. And he took me to a whole nother building. It looked like a school. It was a school, but it was a technical school. And inside of that building, they had every trade that you could think of that a child would need. And even if they don't, go to college, they could end up coming out of there with a construction certificate, with a welding certificate, with a cooking certificate. They could be chefs. I don't understand how the largest school district in the state of Texas does not have something like that for our children. We are failing our children on the educational front in Harris County. If you look at the number of crimes that have been committed by school-age kids, if you look at the number of crimes that have been committed on the campus, which they're padding the books, they're cooking the books on those. They won't tell us the real. But I mean, last week alone at a local high school, don't want to embarrass the high school because we're dealing with it, they found 3 guns on the same campus. And I'm telling people that it's serious. And the people that can make the decisions are not making the right decisions. Now, this is a good question that's coming up for each of you. Whether you knew it or not, me and a couple of my friends, Dr. Abdul Halim Muhammad, some call him Dr. Robert Muhammad, Reginald Gordon, OG1, we created a 21-page comprehensive plan that deals with crime. We worked that plan, and we know that it can decrease crime because we went through the community and we instituted portions of the plan. So now each one of you guys would be in a unique position that maybe you could help fund that plan. Don't just take me out of the equation. If there's a plan there that has been proven to work and it incorporates school, city government, clergy, everybody, would you be willing to honestly sit down and look at this plan and possibly provide some type of funding for that plan? And the reason I say that, and Pastor, don't get mad at me, we done tried everything. We didn't even try Jesus with this crime in Harris County. Can we try something else? But it's the only plan that was ever endorsed by the Gun Violence Commission that Turner put together after the kids got killed at Santa Fe. He wouldn't fund it because he didn't like the fact that I held him accountable. Would you be willing to, if you got some boots on the ground organizations that come up with some fantastic ideas and it's proven to work in the position that you're in, would you be willing to help that boots on the ground organization? Judge Risner?
Of course I would. I mean, you don't have to spend money or throw money to sometime come up with a cure. And just as you kind of spelled it out with the 3 of you and your involvement, it takes a village to raise the child. That's basically what we're saying. It takes all of us. It doesn't matter what school district your kids go to. They're all your kids. They're going to be one day somehow associated with your kids, you, and the whole community. We want the best for all kids. The ones that want to learn and the ones that don't want to learn, we have to help and reach out. Of course, if you or anyone else came up with a program that sounds like it would fit in as well as the one you're speaking of course I'd be for it. I'd be for anything that helped any kids. If we're talking about 1 or 100, you've got to help them all. We're all in this together. Of course, I would.
Pastor Vega?
Yes, sir. So most definitely I'm for it. And we started taking Jesus out of schools back in the 60s. And so 63 to be exact. And so when we started removing Jesus out of it, we end up with where we're at. And I'm not going to turn this into a Jesus show. But however, I do believe that yeah, absolutely, I'm willing to look at the plan, and if we have to create funding for it, if it's proven work, absolutely, we have to have something to do something. And listen, what we have right now is a crisis, and like Judge Risner said, that these children are going to be integrated with our own children, and like Ron said, these are our future. They're going to be in positions one day. One day, those children are going to be sitting right here, us four, and talking about these other kids that are coming up. And we got to trust them to be able to be in positions of leadership, to be able to make judgment calls, to be able to improve their living, how they're living. And right now, our community is desperately crying out to us in the education front. And if you guys put in the work and it's proven, why not? Why can't we look at this and say, hey, we got to try to implement something? So I'm definitely for all plans that help improve education and our children across Harris County.
Mr. Campana, same question.
Yeah, obviously, as a justice of the peace, we don't fund anything, but I would love the tools as a judge, because justice of the peace court hears many of these misdemeanor infractions that happen in schools, and without all options available, especially ones that are proven to work, I would feel as though I didn't have the necessary tools to complete my duties. So absolutely, I would support the development of alternatives, of options for these children to become fully integrated in their education and in our community. So absolutely, I would support something like that.
All right, we're getting down to the end, and I think the people want to see us battle. So I got a wild card question. Oh, I got a wild card. There was a bill that was passed, SB1, and it dealt with voter suppression, voter integrity. I call it voter integrity laws. Do you think that the current laws, the way that they are truly impacting and suppressing the vote of the people as it pertains to these mail ballots? We know that a lot of these mail ballots have been kicked back for whatever the reasons, but is this law really affecting people's ability to be able to vote? Judge Risner?
Anytime, of course, I think everybody should be able to vote. I understand that you should be registered and only vote once. But if you're of the legal age and you're of the mind to be able to vote, I think you ought to be able to vote in a grocery store or anywhere else. But it should be run honestly and only get one vote. But anytime you set up any guidelines to eliminate anybody from having the ability to vote, the old poll tax where you had to pay a tax to vote, that wasn't right. I mean, everybody, realizes that now. But back in those days when I was very young, I remember everybody having to pay a poll tax. You shouldn't have to be of a certain income or a certain color or a certain education to be able to vote. I would like to be able to take all the requirements away from voting and be at a legal age of 18, and that you care enough about your country or your city or your county to vote, and that you're registered in some type to where they know you only vote once as required. The less obstacles to keep somebody from voting, you don't know what the true wishes of the people. If you eliminate a group of people for any reason, you don't really at the end know the real calling of the people, meaning who they really want to vote for to be in that position to do better for their city, their county, or their state or federal government.
Pastor Vega, is SB1 really impacting people's ability to vote?
No. Here's the thing. If you're a voter, right, we should be able to, we got to be able to prove who you are. We got to have election integrity, right, across the United States of America. And I have to agree with Judge, a poll tax to operate our constitutional right is wrong, period. However, I do believe that the person voting should be able to prove the identity of themselves to show that they are a citizen of this state or this country to cast their vote where they live for the elected officials. An example, I'm running for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 2. There's no one from Louisiana that should be able to come in and vote for me. We have to be able to secure the election integrity across this land. Now, we know fraud has been going on for hundreds of years, right? This is nothing new. It's happened whenever blacks gained freedom, right? We know that what was took, and all through the civil rights and everything that has moved on forward. But we, as the people, have to get better and be able to prove that these votes are who they are. What we've done in the last election of the presidential election, that across the United States on both sides, Democrat and Republican, that we have lost we've lost the people in a sense, that they've lost the willingness to vote because they don't trust the system. And I think we're starting to see it right now in the polls. If we look at the polls right now in Harris County, Republicans and Democrats aren't coming out to vote, period. And so I think it's very important for us to ensure the citizens, state and United States, that our elections are secure and that we're going to do the right thing. So making sure that we do have the proper things in place so illegals aren't voting, or dead people aren't voting, or people are voting multiple times, or whatever the case may be, that these things have to stop and we have to minimize them, period.
Mr. Campana, is SB1 affecting people's ability to vote?
Well, I think we're going to know at the end of this election cycle, first of all. The other thing I want to suggest is I absolutely agree with the statements of Pastor Vega and Judge Risner. There has to be a reliable system in place that everyone has confidence in. And to the extent that laws are passed that will ensure that and make the public confident in our election system, I'm all for that. But I voted this week, and if you want to share experiences of how now there are paper ballots, 2-page systems, 2 machines that you have to use to cast your ballot, I think voting has become cumbersome. And I think as people move forward and cast their ballots, this time just the mechanics of voting has changed. And I think a lot of people are going to have opinions about that. And this is part of SB1 to get these types of systems in place. They are time consuming. And I think they disproportionately affect metropolitan areas versus rural areas. In other words, if there is a long line of voters and it takes us 15 minutes to get past a 2-page ballot here in Harris County, I think people will not really feel as though they want to wait in line or they want to postpone it to the next day, and it might have an unintended effect here. But after this cycle, I hope all of us can sit down and have open and honest conversations about what went right and about what went wrong, and then we can make future adjustments. But it takes all of us here to discuss these issues in a manner that's directed towards solutions that I really appreciate you having me on this show tonight.
I tell you what, this is the way that I feel about it. I spoke in favor of SB1 twice when the legislation was in session, and that day those 2 days that I spoke were different months, but it was only maybe 3 African Americans total that spoke in favor of SB1. Now, this week alone, I saw that they were trying to say, well, allow people to use their library cards to go and vote. Well, you can't get a library card unless you got an ID. You can't get public assistance unless you got an ID. Oh, well, they're just getting out of jail. Well, they have several different programs set up for them to help them obtain an ID. I believe that there's something going on in Harris County, and the Harris County officials that are crying in regards to SB1 know for a fact that if they can't do what they need to do, they're going to lose their seats. So for me, when I get in office, I want to strengthen. I really want to strengthen voter integrity laws, because it's no more getting around this. If you want to vote, part of being an American citizen is having the right to vote. There is a way that you have to go about doing that. So even if it takes a long amount of time, Mr. Campana, to go in there, it's time consuming. Why don't you go vote when it's early voting, when there's nobody in there? We got to stop. We have to stop making the excuses, because I'm telling you, you cannot get public assistance unless you have an ID card. It's not going to happen. Anybody want to rebuttal, you're free to go.
I would like to bring out that I do think it's very important that if you can vote early between now and Friday, you should do it. And I think everybody that's qualified to vote should vote. Don't take anything that I've said to mean that people that are unqualified or don't show the accepted credentials. I don't want anybody voting twice. I don't want anybody voting for anyone else other than themselves. But I do want them to vote, and I want them to go early, because I am worried about the small number that's voted thus far and what might happen on election day. So please, if you're a registered voter and you can vote, please go between now and Friday. Not that you can't vote on Tuesday the 1st. You're welcome to. But as some of the problems that seem like they're coming up and the support that the election judges are having from downtown is not what it used to be. Like everything else, there's been so many changes made in purchasing, payroll, even in the election division. The people that has run it for so many years aren't there anymore. There's not the support. So when there's a problem there in my courthouse, on the very first day, the electricity was off for 4 or 5 hours on the first day of voting early. We're supposed to have a backup generator. Luckily, the machines had a battery pack to where they could continue to vote. Of course, nobody's going to come into a dark building, and I don't blame them. But we all have to do our jobs better, and even in the election division. And I pray and hope that between now and Friday, everybody that wants to vote gets in and does it at their leisure and in a reasonable amount of time. But if you can't and you have to vote on election day, be sure and vote. It's very important to Harris County and to your neighbors and to yourself and families, because of the crime problem and because of the education problem here that exists in Harris County. And thank you again, General, for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Pastor Vega or Roy or Ron, you want to rebuttal that last question?
Yeah, I'll say I don't really think there's anything to rebut. I think we're all in agreement that there needs to be fair elections and people have to be qualified to vote. It's just there's always adjustments that need to be made after changes have occurred. I want everybody to have an open mind and encourage people to vote and facilitate people to vote with reasonable not restrictions, but reasonable qualifications. So I think all of us have to be in agreement that we have to support this system, the fair and open elections, and we all need to do whatever we can to support that. Thank you.
Would you like to rebut Pastor Vega?
Yeah, I think that again, anybody that's going to go against the SB1 obviously has wrongful intentions. I feel personally, we have to have a driver's license for everything. We have to prove our identity for everything. Food stamps, liquor, going to go drive your vehicle, going to get open up a bank. Everywhere you go requires an identity to prove who you are. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just who we are as a society. And I think And I love what Ron was saying, is that we all have to be open-minded to make adjustments at the end of the day when it's all over. If there's areas of improvement, why not look at the improvements if we can improve as a society as a whole to better for the people. I'll tell you one of the things that I really liked, and it's been around for a while, but for a long time, if you were a felon, you couldn't vote. And then now, if as long as you're off parole and off of everything, you can vote. But I believe I was reading somewhere that they want to change that back to where if you're a felon, you can't vote anymore. I was reading that somewhere. I hope that's wrong, because if they've done their time and they've done everything that they've done, and they're paying taxes and they're doing what they need to do, they should earn that right back to be able to vote as a citizen. And I hope to only encourage the listeners out there to stay up on top of this, because if we go back to redoing how we're going to allow people to vote, our individuals that made mistakes and have done the time, they're still citizens of the United States, and they're still citizens of Texas, and we would like to encourage them to get out and vote. And a lot of felons that I've run into in the last year are like, "Oh, I can't vote, I'm a felon." So the understanding out on the streets is still that they can't cast their vote because they had a felon 10 years ago. It's like, no, man, you're not on parole or anything. You can vote. And they're excited to vote, which is good because they've never had that opportunity. And we should encourage individuals to get out there and to vote.
We're going to close it out with this. One, I thank all of you guys for taking the time out. I know how hard it is to squeeze anything into your schedules at the moment. So thank you for taking the time out to come and sit down and talk to me. I will tell you, based on the comments I've been looking at, you see me looking away every now and then, you done picked up some votes in here. You guys have picked up some votes in here tonight from people that didn't know you, didn't know your stance. So I want you to close it out, each one of you, with telling these people who you are, what you're running for, and why should they vote for you. We'll start with Judge Risner.
Thank you, General, once again for this opportunity. For anyone out there that hasn't read anything or learned anything about me thus far, I want to tell you I'm George Risner. I've been a Harris County Democratic Justice of the Peace for 35 years. I'm on my 36th year. I decided to run mainly because of the defunding of the criminal justice system in Harris County. The main thing we're talking about tonight, I don't believe it's a Republican Democrat subject, because the Republicans that are running are talking about the criminal justice system here in Harris County too. It has been defunded from the prosecution, the DA side, to the sheriff and the jail side, to now they're trying to do away with constables. We've got to put a stop to it. We've got to make your safety, my safety, and our family safety number one priority in Harris County again. In order to do that, you've got to make some changes, because this gentleman's been in for over 3 years. It took him 3 years, 1 month, and 7 days to realize there's a criminal problem in Harris County. This is a past police officer, Houston, 23 years, a past sheriff in Harris County for 7, and it took him 3 years, 1 month, and 7 days to figure out there's a criminal problem. We need change. If you vote for George Risner for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 2, I will promise you change, and I will promise you change in the area of the criminal justice system and make it fair to all. Thank you.
Pastor Vega, closing thoughts.
Yeah, again, I'd like to thank everybody on here. It was great topics, great conversing with all of us and getting to see where we all stand. And it seems like we're all in agreements. We want change in our county. We want change in our cities, and we want our cities and county to thrive. We want to be able to be a front leader in multiple areas. In the medical field and technology and space and aerospace engineering. We're known for a lot of great things, but right now we're known for human trafficking and violence across of our county and streets. And I'll tell you that it needs to stop. I've been serving our community for well over 10 years. I've been serving our communities day and night. You can look me up as Pastor Richard Vega in Houston, Texas. I helped fight the sex robots when they're trying to bring them coming here against the story time with the drag queen at the library. I went to the state capitol and lobbied to save the girls' sports. And not only did I lobby, I also went to the Texas Constitutional Rights Committee and testified in front of them on why we should protect women's rights and young girls' minds, and they should be able to compete with biological girls instead of competing with men. I also went to the U.S. Supreme Court out there for a press conference with Ken Paxton while we supported the heartbeat bill. So I've been continuing to fight. I will always continue to fight for our community and what we believe in as conservatives. I look to represent you as your Harris County Commissioner on Precinct 2. That's Adrian Garcia's seat right now. And I just feel like I'm the perfect man for the job. And I don't want to say perfect as in being pig-headed or anything, but I just feel like I can get things done. I believe I know our community. I've been working in our community. And when I say our community, all throughout Precinct 2. I'm a pastor who's very involved in the community, in the streets, in schools, and with veterans. I mean, all throughout, I'm plugged in. And I will continue to stay plugged in. I know the heartbeat of our community, and I want to continue to serve you at a higher level. So look for me as Richard Vega on the ballot and on the Republican ballot. And I'm looking to serve you. I'm also a veteran of the United States Armed Forces. I served 4.5 years with a reenlistment of 6 before I was injured at the National Training Center, which is, you can go and research that. But anyways, I'm grateful and thankful for each and every one of you that got on here to listen to us tonight.
Mr. Campana, closing thoughts for the people.
Sure. Thank you all, particularly thank Pastor Vega for his service to our country. And I am running for Justice of the Peace, Precinct 1, Place 2. It's a very diverse area. It goes from Bel Air to Aldine, Acres Homes to West University, River Oaks to Greenspoint. It is a microcosm of our community, and I want to serve our community. I've been a lawyer for over 37 years. These courts and all our courts have been particularly affected by the pandemic. There's been an interruption in jury service. There has been a moratorium on evictions. I believe we need experienced people at this point to serve our community. I am that person in that race. I am the most experienced person. But beyond my legal experience of 37 years, I have served our community as director on a homeless shelter in the precinct. I have also been president of a utility district that provided clean water to our community. Let me continue to serve you as your Justice of the Peace here in Precinct 1, and thank you very much for this discussion with all of you.
Well, I'm going to close it out by saying what you guys got to see tonight is 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats sitting in the same room, technically, discussing issues. Race never came up. There was no arguing. There was no fussing. There was no fighting. But I think if you can put 4 men in one room who are on different sides of the ticket, and we can all sit down and we can think about things and come up with rational solutions, we could change Harris County. For me, I'm running for State Rep 131, House District 131. You already know my resume. You already know that I'm going to work hard. I don't know how to do anything else. That's all I've been doing since I was 16 years old, is working hard. I don't know how to fail. I really don't. Because if I fail, then I'll fail the people. But today, you got to hear 4 different perspectives from 4 highly intelligent men who wish to serve you in a higher capacity. It is now up to you to go to the polls and make a conscious decision. Because if you don't like what you see, whether it's Republican or Democrat, then you got 4 good choices right here in those races. You can make the difference if that's what you want to do. Your vote is your voice. And it's time that you guys start using your voices the right way. I want to thank you guys for taking the time out to come on. You're welcome to come back anytime you want. Win, lose, or draw, you're always welcome to come to the War Zone. And I think the people have really enjoyed themselves tonight. It's been quite refreshing for them as well as for me. But I can tell you this, you learned tonight, Democrats and Republicans can work together. They can work together if it's for the greater good. Because I got a strange feeling we all report to a higher power. We all report to a higher power, and we only want what's best for the city and the county that we love, and we want some things to change. Say, man, it's a reason I'm the best in the business. Every night, 7 o'clock, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. It's the War Zone. I want to thank my guests, Judge George Risner, Pastor Richard Vega, Roy Campana, and y'all already know who I am. Get on the phone and tell them I'm the 5-star general. All the way up to election day, I got politicians coming. I ain't gonna tell you who, but they coming. They want to sit down with the general, and some days that seat get real hot. Come on. And I'm happy tonight. We had 2 bold Democrats that showed up, and we had a fantastic conversation. Until tomorrow, we'll holler at you.